In the sweltering heat of an Arizona Territory summer in 1878, beneath a red moon that hung low like an ominous eye over the dust-choked plains, Maria Lane's life shattered in silence. That moon, ancient and watchful, seemed to herald more than heat. Its crimson light carried a heavy omen. The birds had gone quiet, as if the land itself held its breath. Within the thin canvas of her father's whiskey tent, Maria pressed a trembling hand to the wall, her breath shallow, her body rigid with dread. The words of the fortune seer echoed like a curse in her memory. She carries no seed. Her womb is closed. No children will come. At only 22, Maria had already endured a lifetime of quiet scorn and disappointed glances. Her monthly cycle had long since vanished. At first, a cause for concern, then quiet despair, and now bitter certainty. She had prayed until the prayers felt like lies. And now the words were final. Her father, Isaac Lane, reeked of rot-gut whiskey, and grief twisted into fury. He stumbled into the tent with the gait of a man crumbling from within, his eyes glazed yet sparkling with cruel clarity when they found her. "Bring me that girl," he growled, the words thick with venom and desperation. Maria froze. The red moonlight slashed across the clearing outside, painting her in blood. Around the distillery, the camp's familiar edges seemed to close in with judgment. Isaac poured himself another glass, his shaking hands suddenly steady, animated not by love but fanaticism. "She will bear no children," he hissed to the empty air, as if the spirits themselves were listening. The seer spoke truth. "Our line ends with her. She is a dry branch, a field no man would bother to seed." His voice cut into her like a branding iron. Maria's voice broke as she whispered, "Father, please." But Isaac slammed the bottle onto the crate beside him, his rage cracking through the night. "No more. I will not live with shame. I will not be the man with a useless daughter. A burden." He seized her by the arm, shaking her with the fury of a storm. "You are broken. The seer says so. And I believe him more than I ever believed your mother or you or God himself." Maria's tears streamed in silence, catching the firelight with each fall. She stepped back, eyes burning, trying to steady her breath. "That's not true," she said. But Isaac sneered. "It doesn't matter what's true. What matters is peace. And I have traded you for it." For a moment, the world went still. Maria thought she misunderstood, until Isaac pulled a parchment from his coat. It sealed dark and official. "I made a pact with Tayson. He is the young Apache chief. I gave you to him in exchange for peace, an end to raids, safety for the settlers, for me, for the town, and for you, a place where you can be useful." Maria's heart pounded. "You can't trade me like livestock," she said, breathless with rage. Isaac's face went cold. "You have no value here. I am sparing you from disgrace. This is mercy." He let her go, his hand falling as if she no longer even existed. "You are nothing but a shadow to this place." She stumbled backward, fury and sorrow crashing inside her like a flood. "You pity me?" she said. "I pity you." He didn't reply. He simply turned and raised his bottle, his silhouette swallowed by red light. "Goodbye, daughter." Two men stepped from the shadows with crates in hand and grim faces. "Time to go," one said. Maria's legs buckled as they forced her into the wagon. The wood was rough beneath her, the rope bindings tight. She looked back once more, the red moon bathing the distillery, her father's figure, and the only life she'd ever known. As the wheels turned, every jolt of the wagon felt like a piece of her soul being torn away. Behind her, the moon sank westward, but the mark it left on her heart would not fade. Her life, as she knew it, ended that night under a cursed sky. When she awoke, the wagon had stopped. Firelight flickered through the slats of rough-hewn poles. Distant drums thudded in rhythm, and voices drifted in a language she didn't understand. The air was thick with sage smoke and something else, something wild and unyielding. Maria smoothed her wrinkled skirts with shaking hands, then forced herself to climb down. Her shoes touched hard, dry earth. Around her, Apache warriors stood in concentric rings around a towering bonfire, their faces bronze-lit and unreadable, eyes sharp as obsidian blades. At the center stood a tall figure, broad-shouldered and still, clothed in leather and crowned with eagle feather headdress. His dark eyes watched her with the calm gravity of storm held barely in check. This was Tayson, the man her father had given her to. He said nothing at first. His silence was more powerful than any shout. His gaze studied her, not with cruelty, but with wary judgment, as though measuring a puzzle the world had thrown in his path. Finally, his voice cut through the fire-crackling silence. It was deep, steady, and carried the weight of purpose. Mariah opened her mouth to speak, but the words died before they could form. The question, so simple, so direct, cracked something deep inside her. Shame surged up like floodwaters. Her heart beat like a trapped animal, hammering against her ribs. She lowered her eyes, unable to meet his gaze. Yet Tayson waited. He did not press her. The fire flickered in the silence, casting shadows across the solemn faces of his warriors. Finally, she lifted her chin. He said, "I am useless," she whispered, the words fragile and bitter. He said, "I cannot bear children. So he gives me to you." Tayson's expression changed. A flicker of something fierce crossed his face. Anger, revulsion. Not at her, but at the cruelty she had suffered. His jaw tightened as he turned slightly, glancing at his warriors. Some shifted uncomfortably beneath his gaze. Their judgment was palpable. She could feel it as keenly as if they'd spoken aloud. He took one step toward her, his movements deliberate, reaching to the treaty tied at his belt. He ran a hand over the parchment. An agreement he had accepted, though clearly with reluctance. When he spoke, his voice was steel, calm but resolute. "No white man will touch you in my territory. Understand this." The words struck her like unexpected warmth in a cold wind. She had feared being treated like property, passed from man to man. But in that single sentence, he gave her a sliver of something she hadn't felt in days: dignity. A low murmur rippled through the assembled warriors. Though she couldn't understand the language, the tone was unmistakable. Dismissal, derision, wasted blood. No children. Her cheeks burned. Shame curled her spine and she folded inward, her eyes blurred with tears. The scent of wood smoke, horses, and dust swirled around her, grounding her in the reality of a place where she would never be fully welcome. Then Tayson's voice rang out above the whispers, strong and cutting. "She is not a prize. She is not a burden. She is under my protection." A warrior near the front stepped forward and spat in the dirt. "She is empty, not fit to bear life," he said, his voice sharp with contempt. Others nodded. Mariah flinched as if struck. Her knees gave out, scraping against the dry earth as she collapsed. Hot tears slid down her cheeks, not from pain, but from the weight of rejection she could no longer carry. In that moment, Tayson moved. Without fanfare, without hesitation, he stepped to her side. His presence was like a stone wall between her and the crowd. He laid a steady hand on her shoulder, not possessive, not commanding, but unyielding. His voice dropped to a growl. "This woman is not for sale. She is under my warrior's honor. Anyone who harms her harms a tribe." A hush fell. Even the crackling fire seemed to draw back in silence. The air thickened with the power of his words. Mariah looked up at him, astonished. His face had softened, not out of pity, but with resolve. A warrior's promise, not a man's indulgence. He offered her his arm. She took it, hands trembling, and his grip anchored her like a post driven into stormy ground. He led her away from the fire circle, past the watching eyes, into the quieter parts of the camp. They passed tents and low fires, and finally came to a secluded corner between two hills, shaded by a cedar tree. There stood a modest lodge built from bent saplings and rawhide. It was small, clean, and clearly separate from the rest. It felt like an offering, a gesture of respect. He pulled back the flap and motioned for her to enter. "You will sleep in my lodge," he said simply. She stepped inside, cautious but grateful. Animal skins lined the ground in a makeshift bed. A hollowed-out pole stood in the corner for her belongings. He did not touch her again, only gestured. Not safety, but acknowledgement. A kind of space to exist without panic. He said quietly, "I will be outside." The cool night air stung her skin as she settled beneath the covers. He stood at the threshold a moment longer. Your father humiliated both of us, he added. I will not allow further disgrace. Mariah looked up at him, her voice cracking with emotion. Why do you help me? He stared into the darkness beyond the camp, at the dying embers of the fire. I did not ask for this, he said. But now that you stand here, you are mine to protect. It wasn't a claim. It was a shield, his words wrapped around her, firm as armor. She closed her eyes, drawing the animal skins tighter, the scent of smoke and cedar around her. Her hand brushed a locket at her neck, a small oval, the only thing she had left of her mother. She clutched it, steeling herself. Then from the camp, a voice shouted, She is worthless. She cannot bear children. Return her. Tayson straightened. His hand moved the knife at his belt. She stays, he said, voice sharp as a blade. Your grudge is with me, not her. The air tensed like a drawn bow. Mariah watched him, standing tall, pulse visibly beating at his throat. He did not protect her with flattery. He protected her with defiance. Her eyes blurred again, but this time not from fear, from something else, from a dawning sense of belonging, of being defended not because she was useful, but because she mattered. She took a halting step toward him. Thank you, she said softly. He nodded, as if accepting her gratitude was both difficult and necessary. He turned to a nearby warrior. That one, he said, stand guard tonight. As she laid down, her eyes clung to his silhouette, still and resolute, framed by firelight. He didn't touch her, didn't offer comfort in the usual ways, but he stood there a sentinel. The scent of wood smoke and sage clung to the furs like a memory, lingering in the corners of the lodge. A lantern flickered on a small shelf, casting a warm golden light that danced across the modest space. There was a low table set with a clay bowl and a pitcher of water, a sleeping area made of woven mats layered with thick woolen blankets. 2 bundles of dried herbs, lavender and cedar, she thought, hung from the center pole, swaying gently in the draft. Mariah stood just inside the entrance, arms wrapped tightly around her body. Her feet refused to move further. The space was quiet, too quiet, and her mind spun with uncertainty. Behind her, the flap rustled. Dunky stepped in but remained near the entrance. His presence was solid, like a mountain in shadow. You will sleep here alone, he said. This is yours now. He did not look at her as he spoke, nor did he wait for an answer. Mariah's eyes moved across the room with measured suspicion, her gaze lingering on corners and shadows, searching for traps or intentions. He turned to the table and placed something on it with gentle care, a long, slender object carved from dark wood, polished smooth, with delicate etchings fading along its body. A flute, without another word. He stepped outside and let the flap fall shut behind him. Mariah moved toward the table. Her hands hovered uncertainly over the flute before lifting it. It was lighter than she expected. The finger holes were worn soft from use, the mouthpiece slightly dulled by time and breath. She raised it halfway to her lips, as if drawn by instinct, but her throat constricted. Her hands began to tremble. Slowly, she lowered it and set it back on the table. She folded onto the floor beside the fire pit, pulling her knees into her chest. The fire crackled softly, its warmth reaching toward her, but her thoughts had drifted far. Her father's voice haunted the corners of her mind. The shame, the words that had reduced her to a transaction. She did not cry, not tonight, but her eyes never closed, not until the lantern flickered into embers. The next morning, Mariah stepped out of the lodge, blinking against the early sun. Her hair was loose, her dress still creased from sleep. Tasunki stood nearby, one hand resting on the saddle of a waiting horse. His posture was unhurried, calm. I will teach you to ride, he said, simply. Mariah hesitated. Why? She asked, her voice more defensive than she meant. He adjusted the saddle strap without looking at her. Because every person should know how to move with the land, not just be moved by it. There was no command in his voice, only a quiet offer. She nodded, uncertain but curious. He helped her mount, not with force or instruction, just a steady hand beneath her foot and another at the saddle horn. Once seated, He walked beside the horse, leading it with a loose rein and a voice as calm as the morning wind. "You lean with the hill," he said as they moved over uneven ground. "Not against it. Trust the animal. It knows where the earth falls." Mariah followed his directions, awkward at first, then slowly finding her balance. They didn't speak much, but at one moment, when the breeze lifted her hair and cleared her face, she looked down and met his eyes. There was no judgment in them, no desire, just stillness, recognition, as if he saw not a broken girl or a bartered thing, but a person, someone real. She turned her gaze away, her throat tight with things unspoken. By the time they returned to camp, her legs ached and her hands were raw from holding the horn, but her spine was straighter. Her shoulders had uncurled. She dismounted on her own. Tasunki gave a small nod of acknowledgement, then left her to return to the lodge alone. Inside, the air was cool and quiet. She poured a cup of water, drank slowly, then turned toward the table. Her eyes rested on the flute. She picked it up again. This time, she pressed it to her lips, not to play, but to feel the shape of breath against sound. No music came, but something in her eased. The silence no longer felt like loneliness, just space. The child's lips. His mouth twitched, but he swallowed. She stroked his damp hair and murmured soft, steady words he wouldn't understand, but her tone carried the comfort. The boy's mother knelt beside her, hands pressed to her lips, watching every movement with desperate eyes. Mariah worked in silence. She had not practiced in years, not since her father told her it was wasted effort on someone unworthy of a family. But her hands remembered. Her mind, dulled by shame for so long, was waking again. She cooled cloths, soothed the boy's fevered skin, and waited. Hours passed. Outside, the fire crackled lower. Night thickened, and the camp grew still. Footsteps approached. It was Tasunki. He ducked his head and entered the lodge, his eyes falling first on the child, then on Mariah. He said nothing, only crouched beside the boy's mother, his presence a silent shield. Eventually, the child's breathing deepened. The harsh rattling in his chest quieted. His small hand opened on the blanket, like a petal relaxing. Mariah exhaled, trembling. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath for so long. The boy's mother reached out and touched Mariah's sleeve, a whisper of contact, reverent. Then she spoke. One word. Mariah didn't know its meaning, but the tone was unmistakable. "Thank you." She sat back on her heels, exhausted. Sweat clung to her neck, and her limbs felt heavy. But something new stirred beneath the weight. Worth, not as a symbol or a trade, but as someone who could do good, someone needed. Tasunki walked her out into the cool air. The sky above was deep with stars, infinite and ancient. He said nothing at first, just stood beside her, his arms crossed, his posture easy. "You do," he said. "Even if he doesn't wake, you gave his mother hope. You made her feel less alone in the dark. That matters." Mariah looked at him then, really looked. "Why do you keep standing by me?" He tilted his head. "Because I was taught to honor what is hard to understand, not destroy it." She almost laughed. Instead, she nodded, the feeling catching in her throat. They stood in silence again, the kind that was no longer awkward. As they walked back toward camp, she realized something. She was no longer being led. She was walking beside him. The boy's lips, he coughed, then swallowed. His skin was burning. She dabbed his forehead with cloth soaked in cool water, her hands moving steady now. No hesitation. Outside the lodge, Tayson stood watch. The firelight played across his face, still focused, but behind his eyes was something fierce. Worry. Inside, Mariah lifted the blanket to check for signs of rash or infection. His pulse was thin, but still there. She tied a cloth to support his arm and adjusted the mat beneath him. She reached for clean linen, replaced the sweat-soaked sheet, and whispered gently to the boy in words he might not understand but could still feel. You're going to be okay. Stay with me." Time passed like smoke. She never stopped. Then, near midnight, the boy stirred. He blinked. His mother gasped. Mariah leaned closer. Outside, Tayson exhaled. A quiet ripple spread to the crowd that had begun to gather at the fire's edge. The women murmured. Someone clapped, soft and slow. A girl whispered. She did it. Mariah turned and saw Taz at the entrance, his silhouette framed by firelight. Their eyes met. He tilted his head, the corner of his mouth curving, not a grin, but something more profound, recognition. But the moment shattered when a man stepped forward from the shadows. She is not one of us, the man barked. She uses tricks, not spirit. This is not the Apache weight at Mariah's chest tightened. Her hands curled. Before she could speak, Tayson stepped into the circle of fire. She healed my people, Tayson repeated, louder this time. She saved my cousin's son. When no one else knew what to do, she did not wait. She acted. Dunky's eyes swept the crowd. Do not tell me she is not one of us when she has done what many here could not. Later that night, Mariah returned to her lodge. Her legs were heavy. Her hands still trembled. She sat beside the bed, eyes full of smoke and exhaustion. Her body wanted to collapse. Then the flap rustled. Tunky entered quietly. He knelt, pulled a blanket from the shelf, and draped it around her shoulders. For a moment, he just sat beside her. Then gently, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. That night, sleep came to her like a hush. And outside, the wind carried no whispers, only breath.